This is Michael Taylor and Colt Chris for the Freeze Dried guys. Today's episode's gonna flip the mic around on Colt here, and we're gonna ask 10 questions to pick Colt's brain on all the machines that are out there, basically all the tabletop units, everything from the Harvest Right, Cryonaut, the defreeze, StayFresh, and might even touch on the blue Alpine a bit. But anyways, we're going to break down the pros and cons basically of each one, and if at the end we'll come up with our number one pick, so to speak. You know, we try to be completely non-biased on the show. Nobody's, outside of defreeze, sponsoring us, but it's not even a monetary sponsorship. So, we have there's nothing incentivizing us to make the decision we're going to come to today. I'll put it that way. So anyways, we'll start it off here. And so, Colt, let's start high level here. For someone brand new to freeze drying, whether they're a hobbyist or launching a business, what are the first three things they should consider before choosing a freeze dryer?
I would say if there had to be three key elements, it's obviously going to be price, features, and processing speed. So when you have a machine that has added features that let you do other types of work and it's more adjustable, you can get quicker results through your runs and things like that. So you start to speed up your own process instead of just going in and pushing that auto button like everybody does and let it run. If you have a higher end, more flexible machine, you can shave a lot of time out of your run process. So there's operational side where it's your runtime, but also obviously introductory price, what people are looking for, specific budgets. But yeah, I'd say those are probably the three main areas that they're looking at.
Yeah, what's interesting about a freeze dryer is it's not like any other appliance. I mean, outside of like a refrigerator or something like that. But even then, all it does is one thing continuously. With the freeze dryer, most people are running those machines, as often as possible, and those pumps are going for, months on end. And so, with freeze dryers, I would say that, what are you going to use it for also should apply to that. Is this going to be a business operation? Or are you just trying to do a residential thing where you're freeze drying your garden? You know, because there might be different use dynamics, that are applicable to which brand you choose. So yeah, there's some very valid points. I appreciate that question there, Colt. Well, let's start off with the defreeze first. You've been very involved with the defreeze during its development. What makes this machine technically unique compared to other consumer or prosumer models? And, give us the pros and cons that you see of this unit as far as how it relates to either business or personal use.
So I would say, as for the pros in the defreeze, you have an advanced cooling system. So the pressure to the refrigerant is flexible. It is not always at full pressure. It runs a TXV valve. So it takes less energy to create a better cooling effect. So you're saving a lot of energy there. Also, with the defreeze, you have removable shelves. So if you wanted to run a taller item than what was normal, something like over 2 inches tall, then that, they've made that a possibility, which is a big thing in the industry for people, whether you're going to run big candy or as far as, a bone sample in a lab. that large piece can also fit. There's also a lot of differences in the defreeze, like the software and design. It's completely flexible to the point where you can actually adjust how quickly you want it to apply the heat, and you'll be able to control the vapor pressure. So that's going to allow you to dry specific types of items that you wouldn't normally be able to, I guess you would say, properly. Because sometimes, yes, you can apply too much vacuum and compromise a product. So the defreeze is really designed for the optimal processing of foods where it's preserving them better than other machines currently are. So there's a lot of advantages there. Also, just the energy consumption. So, you have a 50-pound machine that's using 900 watts on average instead of, 1500, 1600, and maybe even more. So it's using a lot less power to do the task in the same amount of time. You're saving there. Yeah, it's just really the flexibility within it that makes it a lot different than any other model currently. The cooling coils being inside of the machine, it is more efficient, but I can say that there is, I guess, one pitfall to this. If you're using your freeze dryer to pre-freeze something in the defreeze, the freezing is not quite as fast as what you would say like a regular cylinder type machine. A fan that oscillates and moves air around during freezing to assist it, but the coil and chamber design is a little bit harder to pre-freeze things with, due to the fact they're designed for the commercial space, and most everybody that's in that area is using a standard freezer to pre-freeze anyways. They're not going to waste time using the machine as a freezer. They just don't have time for that. So the defreeze knew in the design that yes, it's a compromise to not freeze food as well with this type of trap, but our customers are pre-freezing anyways.
Okay.
So yeah.
It makes sense. Let's talk about one of the most well-known brands or names in freeze drying, the Harvest Right. What's your honest take on the reliability and build quality of the most commonly used home units out there?
In the last couple of years, it's really seemed like build quality has gone downhill for Harvester. There was intermittent issues years ago, and people, would get their problems solved. But it seems like either the quality control or the actual quality of parts themselves is suffering, and there are a lot more failures due to this. Within the design, there's really a couple of things they could change relatively easy in order to not have so many issues. One of those things is maybe changing the connection types from the drum. From a manufacturing standpoint, it doesn't really cost a whole lot of money to switch out the threaded flanges that are on the drum to like a KF flange, where people are guaranteed to be leak free. That's something that, you know, they should have opted for a long time ago, because they would have a lot less warranty repairs, just from off leaks and things like that. So like the pass through for the wiring, every other company out here is using some type or other proper GTM seal, StayFresh, Cryonaut, defreeze. They're all using different but comparable quality seals that don't fail. It's a very inexpensive thing to do at a manufacturing level, especially for like a harvest right that's only got, 4 wires coming through it. The 4-wire GTM would cost them almost nothing, but they won't do it. It's a little weird, but
Yeah, I gotta say, most of the common fail points with Harvest Right are all very cheap, easy fixes
They are.
Honestly, I mean, even if they put a markup on those pieces, it still wouldn't affect the full price of the machine, maybe more than 100, maybe at max $200.
Yeah,
And, I mean, they're already one of the cheapest machines on the market as far as tabletops go. So, it's not like they're pushing themselves out of, first place or something by adding a little bit. But yeah, Harvest Right could easily, make a quality product again if they would just fix probably five or six simple, changes to their build. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
some small points, and it would solve a lot of issues.
Yeah. And yeah, like I've said in other episodes, I had that same conversation with their chief engineer, when I was training on how to fix their machines. Yeah, and their attitude was, well, do you want a $5,000 freeze dryer or a $3,000 freeze dryer? And it's like,
That's just
dude,
so odd too, because we know better from, especially me, like at a manufacturing standpoint. I mean, I've worked with a bunch of different companies, and these parts are not expensive.
no,
It is not going to take you from 3 to 5,000. It's going to take you from 3,000 to 31.99,
yeah,
and you're going to actually make a little more profit because I'll just tell everybody the truth. The GTM seals and gaskets and stuff, on a manufacturing standpoint, they would save so much time and effort in not having to seal a thread. They would actually wind up saving money in manufacturing.
well, not just that
So if they
too,
switch,
but
you know,
yeah, not just that too, but the amount of backlog they have at repairs at their facility, you know, um, that if they reduce that number by half, now you're increasing the ability to service other machines. The labor that you would save, you could reduce a couple people in your labor burden at the facility there. I mean, it just makes sense from a business standpoint to, increase the cost. And even like we were saying, even if you added those parts and you did a markup on them, you're still not looking at more than $200. And so,
no.
and it would completely reduce their backlog by at least half. So,
So realistically, in a manufacturing standpoint, the KF flange to weld to the machine is going to cost them pennies
mm,
in bulk. And the GTM seals, a 4-pin GTM instead of their epoxy pass through, 4-pin GTM would cost them somewhere about $3 or $4 to implement, per machine. So yeah, there's really no added cost. And like I said, that if you have to consider they're having to put together the parts and then pass the wires through, and then they're having to apply an epoxy and then take time to let it seat and cure. But if you just take a GTM, thread it on, plug one side, plug the other, you're done. So manufacturing would actually be much quicker.
well, so Cryonaut has generated quite a bit of buzz recently. Have you had any firsthand experience with Cryonaut machines? And what innovations are they focused on? And do you think they'll be sustainable over the long haul?
Yeah, I actually had a lot of input on the Cryonaut machines. So they allowed me to help suggest having a larger compressor than what you would normally have on that machine. So that machine could function on a 1/3 horsepower compressor, but it has a compressor that could run something, twice as large pretty efficiently. It's got a frame design. So instead of the case around the machine being what holds it together, there's actually a steel frame. So we've kind of made the joke that you could pick a Cryonaut down the stairs and then turn it on. And that makes it a little bit different than other machines for, durability. Also, like we were just talking about, having the proper exits and parts. So the all of the exits are KF 25. It has a true depressurization valve that's made for these applications instead of depressurizing to the drain or any other. It's proper valve, and valve is there because you can actually take it off and plumbing to it and attach a vacuum oven to the machine for candy makers for added volume. And that's another reason that machine has the 3/4 horsepower compressor.
Mhm.
It's built to back up a vacuum oven.
Nice.
So it also has the individual tray heating, so you're not just pushing heat to every tray. It's oscillating the heat to keep them
Yeah.
even.
Which is nice,
Um,
like the candy makers, because now they don't have to worry about that top tray, bottom tray, because if it can
so
warm higher than the other ones to maintain that balance equally, then boom, there you go.
also the Cryonaut, I also helped suggest the pump, which is the DRV series, the large gas ballast pumps. And the one thing that kind of stands out is we built some recipes into the machine. So there's pre-made recipes for liquids and all kinds of other things. You've got meats and dairy and delicates. So for a new user, the Cryonaut's really convenient because you can turn it on with vegetables and go. Also, the cycle time, they're quick. You know, you're going to turn around 5 trays of food, 20 to 25 pounds in about 24 hours.
Mm.
Nice, even cycle time. They also have the temperature probe, so you can use that to make the run more accurate.
Yeah,
So
very
if you have an RTD temp probe, you can put it in the food item, and the machine is now tracking and running off of the actual temperature of the food instead of guess
hmm
in an algorithm.
It's amazing how much more efficient you can make your freeze dryer when you have control of your rise over run rate, the defreeze and the Cryonaut both. Sounds like they have a lot more ability to maintain below the triple point and have just a nice, easy rise over run rate that'll allow for quicker batches, quicker processing, and less wear and tear on the machine as well. Let's talk about StayFresh freeze dryers. So, for small business operators or those stepping up from entry level units, what kind of value, design, or performance does StayFresh bring to the table?
So StayFresh is another company that allowed me to put in a lot of help and input in the machines. The StayFresh is just a rock solid performer. I guess you personally, I wouldn't say it's the prettiest machine out there, just a nice gray front, nothing fancy about the screen. But when it comes down to performance, they will consistently do a full load of food in 24 hours in like the standard size machines. They will do consistently and never fail. They're they're built really well. They're a little bit more simplified in the build compared to like Cryonaut, but the actual parts and the way that they're designed is pretty proper. They come off with KF to the drum. They've got a full KF drain. And it's a hard drain line instead of some like flippy hose, that other companies utilize. It also has a proper depressurization. So the advantages of the Stay Fresh is really simplicity and performance for the price. You really do get a lot of performance out of that machine for what you're paying for it. It'll The Stay Fresh machines nearly double the capacity of a Harvest Right machine per run because they're quick. They process a run in so much less time. For instance, a standard Stay Fresh unit will put out more dried food by weight daily than a Harvest Right large, even though it's 60% of the size.
Mhm.
So it's just quick. I've come to find that some people think it's more difficult to operate a Stay Fresh than a Harvest Right. But then when you teach them how to operate the StayFresh, they soon find that it's actually easier.
Hmm.
So it's just that switch. There's so many people that have had HR machines that anything different is difficult.
Yeah.
But then once they understand that they have more power and more processing, they're not running the same way anymore. So when you teach them how to operate and shave time out of the run, they start to really see the advantage then.
Well, customer support can make or break the ownership experience. Which brands are truly standing behind their machines post sale, and which ones are frustrating their users with poor service?
Well, we've seen the issues with HR customers not really getting their problems resolved the way that they think that they should. As for Stay Fresh, they've so far have had a really good record customer service. They've always taken care of people. There's for instance, if somebody were to be shipped a machine and it was damaged in any way during shipping, they immediately just turn around and replace the machine. Other companies tend to not do that. They say, oh, well, if it's a little bit dented or whatever, but it's still functional. But yeah, they do a lot better job about taking care of people and making sure that their needs feel fulfilled. If they're having
Mhm.
problems, they're quick to respond.
Yeah, but I will say that a lot of it does boil down to the craftsmanship of the machine,
Like,
to where, like, for example, Stay Fresh. I've scoured, Facebook or, anywhere to get bad reviews or, things going on with that machine. And, I've only met one person who's ever had, issues with it, but out of how many thousand machines that have been sold, so you're gonna tell me your failure rate is, under 1%, most likely, then that's a pretty rock solid performer. So, and I don't care what machine's on the market, something's gonna have a problem, at some point. So knowing that you're gonna be taken care of and knowing that, a business gonna do the right thing, should be well regarded in this industry because, you know, I mean, there's one that I know off the top of my head that, could give a crap less if your machine is broken. All you are to them is a nuisance unless you're gonna, fork them over hundreds of dollars because your warranty is expired. Then you're a client. Cycle time and throughput are critical for business owners. In your view, which brand offers the best value when it comes to efficient batch speed and production output for scaling a freeze-dried operation?
when it comes to throughput and cycle time, I should say the best value. It's really hard to pin that down to one company. If you look at it dollar for dollar, quickly you're going to process. You over a long time, if you look at the effect of running, let's say, a defreeze machine, um, faster cycle times, plus it's using less power.
Yeah.
So when you really take in the whole scope of it, and instead of just saying how fast can it be done,
Hmm.
how much energy am I using? The combination. I would say that would probably put defreeze out front for processing throughput time, and it would put Cryonaut right next to it or just right below in throughput time.
Hmm.
So it's pretty similar there. But I guess the best value overall, if you looked at the median of it all, processing time and features and flexibility, you're probably going to land somewhere right about like the Cryonaut just because of price, like entry price versus. So if you look at an Alpha, that's a $4,500 machine, runs 20 to 25 pounds of food, but it's going to do quick cycles.
Hmm.
And they're also working on the Titan model, which will run conservatively 50 pounds up to like 65. Is going to have similar processing times. It's kind of a tough one to really dial down who has the best throughput for value right now, but it definitely is right there between defreeze and cryo.
Okay. Well, let's get into materials and build quality. What construction materials are being used across these machines, and where are you noticing quality sacrifices, particularly to consumer grade operations?
Yeah. So when it comes into build quality, a lot of it, the thickness of the steel in the cylinder is kind of a big one. We can kind of start there. They have an extremely thin cylinder. So you're working with high vacuum pressure, low temperature, and high temperature all at the same time.
Mhm.
And it's a very thin cylinder. It's not something that I would suggest doing. You really need to have a good thick stainless cylinder and like a 316 stainless steel, high quality stainless. Also, when it comes to sacrifices, if you're using a bunch of threaded points instead of using KF flanges and, actual industry parts. That's a bit of an issue, I guess, in my point of view, because the accessibility to the right parts is always there. They don't cost any extra. So if you're not using them, then you're trying to, save $1 to potentially create huge headache for a customer down the road. So, like I said, with instead of using like a proper GTM, you've got companies like HR that are epoxying the wires through. Same with Blue Alpine. Um, I would say that both of those would put it to where I just wouldn't touch either of those machines because you're not going to be able to repair that properly. And it's just not proper material science from the beginning. You shouldn't be doing that.
Mhm.
If the right part's available, you would use it. As for sacrifices, also, I've noticed that when it comes down to compressors, if you're using the right compressor with the right charge of refrigerant to create a good system, or are you using a cheaper compressor that's not designed for those pressures, but you're doing it anyway? It's kind of like a harvester. You've got a compressor that's running more pressure than it should be, and that immediately tells you that the service life is going to be shorter. It's never going to make it to the, suggested service life of the compressor.
Warranty and repair logistics often get overlooked. Based on your experience, which brands make it only or make it easy to get parts and services? Yeah, and having a strong warranty, where you also have trust in parts, would help alleviate a lot of that backlog too. Because there's a lot of people that have, their brother's an HVAC guy. I'll do you a favor and fix your freeze dryer in this, next, time off or something I get. So, having the ability for parts to get ordered and arrived prior to say your family member or whatever, coming to your car is something that I've always felt we needed to bring back. So, but you don't see it, especially with one major brand. So,
As for repairs, there's been very very few repairs. There's been very few actual repairs and parts that have failed, and because the machine is designed with all of the flanges, and it's also a very easy machine to take apart. All of the electronics sit in the top of it properly. So I would say there's maybe been a handful of parts replaced on StayFresh machines, and they've all been very very easy, just unplug and plug in type repairs.
yeah.
Same with Cryonaut. There's been no issues with cooling or anything like that. Hasn't been any warranty repairs on Cryonaut machines yet, so that's a good sign. They're just built really robust.
I'm trying, man. I'm struggling. It's late, and I got to get up here in about 4 hours. So, uh,
Listen to my beautiful
yeah.
voice.
There's nothing better than warranty repair to get me amped up, dude. Uh,
Yeah.
all right. Well, I'll be able to edit that little nap out there. All right. Well, final thoughts. Let's say someone had a hard cap of $7,000 to start. And based on everything you've seen, which machine would you recommend for someone looking for reliability, support, and long-term usability?
I would put it this way. If you are doing something in the commercial space where you have commercial licensing, I would go with a defreeze. It's because they're going to have the NSF certification and that's going to keep you legal, which is obviously the most important. But if you are doing, like a cottage business or home use, I would say your best machine is, for value, dependability is is going to be a Cryonaut for a home machine. Um, Realistically, the difference between a Cryonaut and a StayFresh, those are two easy to compare machines.
Hmm.
So you have a similar size machine with the StayFresh, but it has a 1/3 horsepower compressor. Um, doesn't have a steel frame like the Cryonaut. It doesn't have the individual tray heating. So the
Hmm.
StayFresh pulses all the trays at the same time. The Cryonaut is individual. You're also getting the pre-made recipes, and it really is just built. Every piece of it is overbuilt and
Hmm.
more robust. If you want the ultimate home machine, you're going to go with a Cryonaut. And if you're in business, probably need to consider a defreeze just for the legalities.
Yeah. Well, that's some great advice. Thanks, Colt, for sharing your expert opinion on each of these models, and as well as being able to break down and articulate, the pros and cons of them.
I guess before we go, I'd like to throw in a little bit more about the blue Alpine design and why I wouldn't suggest that.
Hmm.
Just a quick rundown. It doesn't have the KF25 plumbing that the rest of the industry. I've made that a standard. If
Hmm.
you're not doing KF25 plumbing, you're not doing it right. Um, the machine uses a flammable refrigerant. It's a propylene, which just for safety, I wouldn't suggest.
Hmm.
They also use a filter inside of the cylinder, um, which is not sanitary. If you consider every time that the machine thaws and then that filter sits inside
Hmm.
collecting whatever, that's another angle that's, they shouldn't have done that. They should have put the filter out on the pump, in line
Hmm.
instead of in the machine. But yeah, I guess there's just a lot of key factors as to why I wouldn't put any money in a blue Alpine machine.
Yeah. Yeah, you said the drum was really, really thin too.
Very
There was a picture that they quickly hid that showed the stock pots they were using.
the picture of they're using an actual cooking stock pot to create high vacuum cylinder
Yeah.
instead of spending the money to have somebody weld them a steel cylinder that will survive that much vacuum.
Yeah. I will say this about Blue Alpine. As much as I don't like their build, I will say their customer service and the ability to get a hold of them if you have an issue is
They,
probably one of the best. Uh,
they do shine there. They've got great customer service.
so if that's what you need, and you're not too worried about, burning your house down or, your drum, collapsing or something like
Imploding.
that. Blue Alpine is got great customer service. So, well, anyways, thanks everybody for listening to the Freeze Dried guys. Again, I'm Michael Taylor, and this is Colt Crisp, and we're on every single major streaming platform, YouTube included now. So, feel free to like, subscribe, share our podcast. The more we can share, the better we are as far as being able to get our message out to the masses. And again, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, and I hope everybody has a wonderful night. See ya.
Yeah, everybody.